And for those of you who are just now tuning in to when I cut all that stuff off at the beginning of this video, when it goes into final publishing on YouTube, welcome to the Genus Brewing live stream. This is a live stream that we do unabashed and uninhibited every single Monday, Sunday at 8:45. And there's never any errors. We're just always on time, no technical difficulties, and it's always just good.
It's an absolute perfect live stream every time, despite Ryan's best intentions.
To sabotage us.
Y'all, it's sabotage.
What we've done so far, we have talked about our Irish Red video that we published this last week. We're going to be doing videos regularly. Go watch that. We also made a...
We haven't got there this far yet, so we're on new stuff right now.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Made a TikTok. So a new TikTok series that seems to be gaining a lot of followers. Basically what happened is Ryan decided to come up on me and be like, hey, make a 5-gallon recipe on the spot. Give me a random beer style that he decided. And so I had to come up with a 5-gallon beer style on the spot, and it is getting some good traction and some good followers. And so if you want to see us do that, he's probably going to continue that trend. There's one of them out there so far, but I think it'd be fun to, down the road, maybe have him go to me for a recipe and then you for the same recipe or the same style. Just see what our differences are, and then he can kind of check against us.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting, especially in the 5-gallon styles. I mean, we work with them all the time. We see the proportions, but especially I'm normally thinking about in the hundreds, if not several hundreds of pounds. And so the percentages, they're not different, but the weights are. So thinking in the percentage and being like, oh, shoot, this isn't like a 200-pound recipe. It's a 15-pound recipe.
Yeah.
But that's why we do percentages, right?
Sometimes.
Because they scale-ish.
They scale-ish. Depends on extract and it depends on a couple other things. We've talked about that before. We'll probably make a video on scaling at some point in time. But Yeah. Lobster beer. We made a lobster beer. That's the whole theme of this thumbnail and everything like that. And we continue and plan on doing another lobster beer event.
Yeah. That'll be pretty fun. We'll put out a video on that. We got some good footage. I mean, maybe a video. I don't know. We'll see how good that footage was. But we'll put out something on that. We plan to actually pair up with a really awesome chef and do a lobster feed with some lobster beer later. So
yeah, and the lobster beer we're doing, we paired with a really awesome brewer in the area that focuses on herbs. A lot of them he grows or forages himself, which is awesome. And so the beer itself was an American wheat style beer, foreshadowing, and it's got a gruit in it, and the gruit kind of helps flavor the beer wort, and then the beer wort helps flavor the lobster, and then the lobster tastes delicious.
Yeah, it was absolutely delicious. I think we still have some left over.
Yeah, I was planning on maybe pressure cooking it. That way we can get tenderies.
Yeah, and pressure cook it, and then do some lobster mac next door.
Yeah,
little some delicious things. All right,
the way to go.
So that's great, and I believe that leads us into
our beer of the week. Beer of the week. Yeah. And this beer of the week, which I already foreshadowed, is an American style wheat beer. I thought that for a lobster beer, my idea was to kind of take, bread and lobster, make a little lobster roll in a beer.
That sounds delicious, actually.
So yeah, American wheat I feel like is the most neutral. Is the most neutral of all the wheat beers, and so you're really relying on that proteinous wheat flavor to come through in American style wheat beer. And other than that, it's just kind of a really good base, which means if you're adding herbs, if you're adding seafood like we always know to do to beer, then it's going to end up being pretty good, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it pretty much is a great base to translate almost any flavor that you want to in there. And especially when you make it good. There are some examples out there that are not great. But when you make a great American wheat, it's just a super refreshing, delicious beer to drink.
Yeah. And I'm not going to hate on Widmer. They have the cleanest traditional style of American wheat style beer out there. But if you do it on the home scale, if you do it on the small scale, if you do it craft, you can make it even better. So
you definitely can. Emphasize more delicious parts that they having to please the masses cannot.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So overall impression of this: a refreshing wheat beer that can display more hop character and less yeast character than their German cousins. Clean fermentation character allows bready, doughy, or grainy wheat flavors to be complemented by a hop flavor and bitterness rather than yeast qualities.
Yeah, so you can rely on the hops to have a little bit of flavor. In the lobster one that we did just do a groot. And to explain what a groot is a collection of spices and herbs that you add during the boil. So non-hop spices and herbs, that lump of stuff is called a gruit that you add to your beer, and that's where gruit ale comes from.
Yeah. So basically in this, we were using spices and herbs instead of hops for the bitterness and flavor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Traditionally, if you're going to do like a classic Widmer-esque but better American wheat beer, hops like Cascade can be really fun, or anything with just a subtle lemony brightness. So you don't want anything too mosaic, like pungent or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, I would say if you're using mosaic in a extremely restrained way, it's almost like you're hopping a light lager with these beers. While you should be able to experience those hops, you're not going to be overwhelmed by them.
You can go that American Pilsner realm, maybe.
Yeah, and especially with some of the new fun hops that are coming out. Hopsteiner just gave us some that were great for a lager. I don't remember what they are, but
Contessa?
yeah, Contessa. Using some of that, actually, lemon drop would probably be phenomenal in it. Something like Mandarina Bavaria.
Classic.
Oh man.
Well, not classic, but new variation of classic.
That would be awesome. Mount Hood and Willamette have been my favorite too to add into wheat beers like this. I love those two hops anyway, but just that nice subtleness of those guys, it's perfect. Do it.
Daniel saying we keep getting really close to the beers he's making. All our beers of the week. Well, it's good. You know, that way you can get a little review on what you might try next.
Yeah, because you're just channeling us through the future.
Yeah, exactly.
One.
Stop being a future sight reader. What are those called?
Precog.
Precog. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a good movie.
That was,
aroma, low to moderate, grainy, bready, doughy, or wheat character. A light to moderate malt sweetness is acceptable. Esters can be moderate to none. I honestly always go for none on this. I'm just, I've got my Bavarian wheats, which I love for one reason, and I got my American wheats, which I love for a completely different reason. So yeast esters, I'm aiming for none. Although should reflect relatively neutral yeast strains, banana is inappropriate for sure, so not a Hefeweizen.
Yeah. And again, I would also go on to this that you shouldn't be getting any character from the yeast. You shouldn't, maybe a slight subtle fruitiness, but even that might just be too much.
Yeah. I'm always aiming for clean. All the fruitiness that you want needs to come out of hops if you're going to add them. And that's going to kind of do fruitiness and brightness at the same time. And so that's kind of what makes it an American style. It's going to be bright and clean and refreshing. When you go on to, clove, no clove. This is 0 of that deep, rich, burning bleh.
This is not a Bavarian Hefeweizen or a German Hefeweizen. This is American. You were going for clean and crispy.
Yeah.
At least for yeast character on that.
Speaking of crispy, this is a very straw yellow beer appearance-wise, but it can actually be clear. You can clarify this, and it'll be 100% fine. It doesn't have to be clear. It can be a little bit hazy, but that hazy, think of this beer range clarity-wise anywhere from like a West Coast to like a light hazy beer. So it's not going to be as hazy as like a really, really hazy IPA, but it can be as clear as a good West Coast IPA. Yeah, that's kind of the range.
Reverend, you were right. AO7 or the Imperial Chico strain is pretty darn good for this. Honestly, I'd say between the two of us, our favorite yeast to use it is the American wheat strain from Yeast 1010.
Yeah.
I use that instead of 1056 or to use that instead of Chico strain.
1056 flagship,
all of that. If you want a clean, crispy beer, like American wheat will work way better.
I can 100% substitute American wheat 1010 for 90% of the beers that I would think of making with Chico. I could do American wheat American wheat almost acts like a Cole strain. It's very brilliant, very bright, but it doesn't have the German kind of malt leaning side of it that a lot of Cole strains have. So the American wheat strain could be really good in American IPAs, American stouts, American wheat beers, obviously, Kolsch's, pseudo lagers. Like there's a lot of stuff you can do with the American wheat beer. It's a very underrated yeast, that American wheat strain.
Amazing. And also to kind of get into this question actually goes into a lot of what we're going into next. Rwanda is American wheat ale a pre-prohibition beer or a style developed because of the homebrewing revolution? Actually, kind of neither. This style developed pretty much by Widmer Brewing Company over here in the Pacific Northwest.
Yep.
I would say that it's an American limitation of ingredients from a German-influenced beer, where it was probably a lot harder to get German yeast, but Widmer still wanted to make a really delicious wheat beer and ended up using what was available, which was probably more of the SO4 or USO5 strain, and made a very delicious wheat beer out of it.
Yeah.
The exact of how that developed on there, I mean, even in the BJCP, it's just an American craft beer adaptation of the German Hefeweizen style using cleaner yeast. Widmer is the example of it. I mean, if you're going by BJCP guidelines, that's pretty much the standard example, and that's what created the popularity of this beer.
Yeah, it's a combination of clean yeast and Northwest hops. So that's where we get a little bit of, in Widmer, it's Cascade, a little bit of Cascadiness. And when it was first launched, it was Old Cascade. So something that a lot of people don't realize is Cascade 20 years ago is not Cascade today. Cascade 20 years ago, for Widmer, it was probably 30 years ago when they did it. So the alpha acids, the alpha acids are on average lower. The total oils are lower, but the flavor kind of comes from the same place. So a little bit of that brightness, a little bit of that, floral, almost citrus quality that Cascade can provide, just done in a more grassy, less total oil content hop. They were using different ingredients back then. So that is what they've tried to mimic today. And so I don't even know if they're still using Cascade, but they're using hops to try to emulate what they did when they first made the beer a long time ago.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it just kind of became one of the things that people made. They wanted to make a delicious beer, but were probably limited by what local ingredients they couldn't use those local ingredients in the best way possible, and came out with an entirely new style definition of beers because it was delicious.
Yeah.
Dave Dempster, yes, your wife has been bugging you for a peach-focused beer. Peach American wheat would be great. Absolutely great, actually. That would be phenomenal. You could even think about maybe roasting a few of them, throw little spices in there. I mean, nutmeg on top of it would be delicious.
And it's great when you put that into a keg and you put that beer on tap, because then when you tap that peach, you might get to tap that peach.
So, yeah. Actually, that'd be really good, too. So, where we got? Dry yeast for American wheat. Honestly, a dry yeast for American wheat. USO5 is going to be
probably the easiest to go to.
Yeah, you could probably use SO4, but use it on the colder range of fermentation. If you ferment it too warm, you're going to get the inappropriate English fruitiness out of it.
Yeah, and you don't want that extra fruitiness. You want this to be a dry, clean mother trucker.
Exactly. All right, so let's see, where did we go from there? We didn't have any more news.
Yeah, just we're just talking about wheat beers and answering Q&As. The whole point of this is to answer Q&As and talk about the beers that we got to drink. Yep, that's what's going on. So if you've got questions, Tim's got the phone. Mine's about to die, so I'm going to plug it in.
Yeah, there you go.
And this doesn't constantly load things.
Like, I don't know why it doesn't do that. Yeah, we're going to drink Schwarzbier next. Schwarzbier! That's probably not something you should have said while I'm pouring you beer. When Peter asks for head. Reverend, no, but you should send us some Chuckanut. I faced a Chuckanut label out because everybody around the world should actually know about Chuckanut. and I do mean this. This is actually serious. Chuckanut is one of my favorite breweries out there on earth. I believe they do some of the best lagers you can get your hands on anywhere. And I mean, I would fight up that. I would die on that hill. Chuckanut is amazing.
And if you actually go to Chuckanut or know the owner, I mean, we'd be interested in a sponsorship deal. So
I mean, definitely.
Not for any money, just for beer.
Just for
They
beer.
just want to send us beer.
Man.
That'll be on every. We'll keep talking about it on every single live stream.
Every single live. I mean, it'll probably happen anyway. But
We'll
if
wear
you
a
could
Chuckanut
send us
shirt and all the
beer
videos.
for that,
Yeah.
and maybe a shirt, please. That would be amazing. No, the gentleman from Seattle actually came over and dropped this off. He was bold enough to put it in Chuckanut bottles because he knows me, or at least watches the live stream on that. He gave us a Dunkel, a Schwarz, and then a Vienna Lager. We downed the Vienna Lager in front of him, and
Yeah.
it was
Really good.
It was amazing. It was actually awesome. So I'm
And
excited
he
about
doesn't
this.
even know us from YouTube. He knows us from our podcast. He's like, yeah, I listen to you guys on Spotify.
Yeah,
So that was kind of fun.
it was actually. That's pretty cool. So I'm excited about this. That
Is that the Brett Bale?
No, that is not. That's a pale ale.
Just a regular Bale?
Regular pale ale. That was the one you told me to grab. Jake
There you go.
Campino.
Yeah, I was like, I don't get much funk.
No. The Brett still sitting. I
There we
didn't
go.
think
Okay,
we
that's what
should
it
drink
was.
the Brett before drinking
probably-
the other beers.
Probably a safe bet.
Probably a safe bet.
What questions we got? We got anything
All right,
popping
so
up?
let's see. Yeah.
Just about a 1-barrel system with a glycol chiller. What temperature should I keep the glycol at to pump through my fermenter? I go for 26 degrees. You can go up down to 22. You really want to make sure if you're going below 26 degrees, you are calculating your percentage of glycol to water, your glycol to water ratio. Because at 20%, I believe 26 degrees is the lowest you can go without risking freezing. And then if you go up to 30%, you can go down below 22 degrees without freezing. So the kind of the 20 to 30% glycol is kind of what you're aiming for. So colder isn't always better. The reason being, water is what carries the heat. So water has the specific heat capacity to make sure you're actually taking heat away from your beer. So you don't want to go too much glycol because glycol has a lower specific heat capacity.
I'm going to say that again for those of you who didn't hear it.
You get the ASMR slurp.
Oh, shit. Oh, no. You should take a drink of this.
Is that his O face?
Almost.
Okay.
Beautiful Schwarz. It's on the higher end of the roast spectrum for Schwarz beer, which normally I'm not about. I don't like them when they get too roasty. Schwarz should be smoother than that, but this is just
Oh, yeah.
phenomenal.
Ooh.
Like- Yeah.
So this dude does lagers. That's what he does. His Vienna wasn't necessarily 100% appropriate to style with the ingredients that he used, but we could tell as soon as we tasted it, the lager fermentation was just spot on.
Just spot on.
Like the yeast profile was amazing. This is where he built really, really big flavors, probably a little bit too much for a classic Schwarz. But the way he fermented with a lager, it's super, super clean, and there is just a subtle, like I call it the Pilsner Urquell kind of, whatever it produces, that Urquell lager strain kind of,
And
that makes you like, ooh, this is a well-developed lager. Like, that's good. This is really well done beer.
like I said, probably a little bit too aggressive on the roast for me, especially for a Schwarz, but I honestly don't care right now. It's phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Is there a subtle hop smell too?
I don't know.
It could just be straight to if it's roasted barley, it could just be roasted barley smell. Like a little bit of green barley smell.
I'm not really perceiving too much. That is delicious.
It's really good.
Yeah. Okay.
I could drink a lot of that.
Yeah.
This guy's name was Jake.
Okay. Not. I don't. This guy was Jake.
That guy was Jake.
Yes.
This guy is the same brewery?
No.
This is the guy that came on Saturday, right?
Yeah, he's the guy that came on Saturday.
Okay, yeah, guy that came on Saturday. I forgot your name. Sorry if you're listening on Spotify right now, but this beer is really, really good.
Yeah, you I mean, you gave us beers while we were imbibing, so that's our fault.
No.
But also
We're-
delicious. You did an amazing job.
We are almost always imbibing, so
Yeah, you know.
literally everyone's going to fall into that category.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gave us beer while
RU486. I have a bunch of hops. They're all coning up. Chinook and Centennial. Thinking of doing a single malt, a bittering hop like Magnum, and throwing all the wet hops in Whirlpool. Thoughts? Yeah, go for it. All right. So, in all honesty, coming to me, like wet hops, all are a bit more grassy and green than I would prefer for most beers, and especially because you have to use so much of them. There's very few that I enjoy. Actually, Cascade is one of them that I super enjoy wet hop, but that's because it gets that extra grassy greeniness that I love out of Cascade. But that's a great idea. I mean, Magnum or Warrior. Magnum's going to be pretty spicy. Warrior might be a little bit better with the Chinook and Centennial than Magnum, but I love Magnum as a bittering hop. That's pretty much my go-to bittering hop. So do it.
Here's some fly traps up in here.
I know. I got like 2.
Jimmy J, thoughts on Wallace Brewing's Schwarz? It's pretty much like an American stout that they tried to Pilsnerize. So although it's not a bad beer, it's not a Schwartz beer.
It's too roasty for a Schwarz. Although I actually really enjoy it. That's one of my more favorite beers from them. And I do actually enjoy a lot of Wallace beers. I've had great times in Wallace.
Yeah.
One of my favorite places to actually go for like a weekend away.
It's a good beer. This is a better beer.
This is a much better beer. It's kind of one of those things that's really hard. It's hard for Americans to do Schwarz because we like really roasty, chocolatey, dark beers.
Yeah.
So
It's hard to realize that Schwartz beers can be like not very dark. Like we think of dark beers when we think about how we make stouts. We can think about dark beers in a lot of other ways, and a lot of people don't wrap their heads around that. The lagering flavors that you can get from your fermentation profile and yeast choice are a huge part of the flavor development. So when you think about Schwartz, you should almost think about that first, and then kind of just build subtle flavors on top of it.
It's trying to make a Pilsner look dark is kind of always how I approach a Schwarz on that. I want to make a beer that's as smooth and easy drinking as a Pilsner is, but this color. So again, for myself, the high roast notes on there, while maybe not style appropriate, it's not style appropriate, I don't enjoy them necessarily in a Schwarz beer. If it's done well, it's delicious, and the Wallace one is actually pretty darn delicious. I enjoy drinking that.
Yeah.
And this. All right, we digressed. One of those.
Disbarged.
All of my pale ales, Ruindu. All of my pale ales and pale adjunct lagers, rice syrup, tend to have a weird sweet almond taste to the flavor profile, especially at the back end. Any idea why?
That's usually a yeast problem.
Yeah, I would say that might be over-esterification, fermenting too warm, not healthy yeast.
Yeah, not necessarily finishing out the job. Could come from, maltotriose and slightly above starches that just weren't fermented out.
Yeah.
So if you're confident your yeast is healthy, my trial solution would be add AMG during fermentation and see if that creates a different profile. So if you're doing a side-by-side, for example, you make one mash, same yeast, 2 different fermenters. Well, one of them has the almond flavor, the other one you added AMG to doesn't, then it's probably something to do with a combination of starch modification and your yeast's ability to eat certain starches. If that's not the case, the more likely thing that it could be before that would be if your yeast just isn't healthy to begin with, and so they're either dying yeast that you're trying to, without a starter, throw into your beer and they're creating some sort of off flavor, or you're just giving your yeast too big of a job to do.
It could also be your specific base malt for that, you have a nutty, or maybe not even base malt. The malts that are going into it, you could have a nuttiness in there already that some yeast health is exacerbating, or it's just not finishing all the way out and you're perceiving it as almond. I don't know. That's a hard one to judge without tasting it.
Yeah, your almond could be way different than our almond, so we might be thinking about different things. But
in all honesty, most of the time when I think about almond flavor in things, I'm honestly thinking about cherry pit flavor rather than actual almonds, because it's delicious. Ferment on cherry pits, it's awesome. All right, so
Rev and KY for fresh hop season: wet hops in the mash, ancient German, or blast it with a Sherman. I'm not sure what that last part means. Wet hops in the mash. So personally, I just stay away from wet hops. Just like they were hype 5 years ago, and now I have a better palate. All I taste when I taste wet hopped beers, no matter who does them, is grass. Like they're just grassy.
That's my opinion too. I think that's why I like the cat. The Crux's Dr. Rudy, I really enjoy. But it's that old school 80s sweet American pale ale base malt, and then just that extra grassiness that's in there I think goes well with the Cascade. But that's one of the only ones I take that back. Actually, Bale Breaker's been doing some decent things with wet hops, but they've been doing wet hop pilsners, which I think is a little bit more appropriate than like a wet hop IPA. It's that little bit of grassiness in the pilsner was delicious. But I also agree with you. You have to add so many more wet hops by weight to make up for the actual volume of what you want, that you're pulling all that grassy greenness out of it, and that's not great for me.
Yeah.
Sorry, I jumped on that, but
there might be another way to get out grassiness, though. If maybe in mash it takes care of some of the grassiness. I'm not really sure. I've never done wet hops and mash, so that's
try it and send us some.
Yeah, let us know if you end up doing it like that. I've never done wet hops and mash. I've always done Whirlpool because I think the Whirlpool eliminates the grassiness the most. Or Whirlpool, like a hop stand is what I usually do, like a hop back with them. But
yeah, I'm loving this question by Jung Hyuk. God, we are murdering your name. I am sorry about that. I think one of the most frequent questions I see online, offline about Schwarzbier is the difference with Dunkel. How would you pinpoint their differences?
Oh, that's easy. Dunkels have banana.
Well, so like Dunkel beer, not Dunkel Weizen.
Yeah.
But they'll have them in there. Dunkel to me is the actual German stout porter of the dark lager world. That's where your roast comes in.
Well, they have so maybe not a ton of banana themselves, but like they have a German fruitiness behind the type of lager yeast they use. So if you're doing a Schwarzbier, you're usually fermenting with like maybe Pilsner lager, but most likely some sort of American lager or even the Urquell strain. Those can all work in that. When you're doing a Dunkel, like a Munich Dunkel, although the Urquell strain might work, usually you're using like the Harvest lager, maybe a Czech lager. There's a lot of other German lager strains that you're going to be using in a Munich Dunkel that will just, even fermented cold, they'll exaggerate the malt a little bit more rather than creating their own yeast profile.
Yeah. For me, and the big difference on those is the roast on it. The Dunkels, when you're getting into the Dunkel range, Munich Dunkel, Dunkelweiss, all of that stuff, that's where you're starting to apply the roast to it.
There's also a bready middle to a lot of the Munich Dunkels. Like a lot of those are going to be like, they can be a heavy percentage of Vienna or Munich malt as the part of the base.
Yeah.
Whereas, Schwarzbier is going to be pretty much Pilsner or two-row as the base. So you don't have that toasted bread middle. You're kind of just like sharp pointing certain flavors on top of it.
Yeah. The Dunkels are big beers. They got big flavor, not in alcohol, but they're big flavored beers. They have a lot going on. You have that mid-range. You have that dark, roasty, toasty to them. You got that good breadiness. Schwarz are clean. For me on that, when you're drinking a Schwarz, you should almost be thinking you're drinking a light pale lager rather than a dark beer. It just happens to look dark. And have a little bit of those, nice kind of dark fruity notes without quite going into the roast. So,
Schwarzbier, to me, it's a light lager. That just has a lot of nice notes of darkness and the color to back it up. Whereas a Dunkel is going to be a dark beer.
Yeah.
It doesn't have like it's not a stout where it has like those big coffee roasties, like none of that. It's not astringent in any way. Like some stouts can be astringent. They're actually allowed to dry out your tongue a little bit. Dunkels, they have all the flavors that back up that darkness and maybe just a hint of that roast, but
roastiness. And
it's subtle.
That's where I'm saying that's kind of the German equivalent of that porter in it. When you're thinking about what is a German porter or what is a German stout, they're the Dunkel beers.
Yeah.
Without going so aggressive on that. And you said it perfectly. Dunkel is a dark beer. Schwarz is a light beer that looks dark.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
And has some flavor to back it up, but not a lot.
Yeah. No. All right. Let's go.
Going to look at ovens today. Ryan McAuliffe is going to look at ovens today. Send us one.
Yes.
We'll just start applying that.
Also, he's hitting up a place in Mount Vernon called District Brewing, and you should also send us some of their beer.
Yeah, inside the oven.
Actually, that'd probably be a good shipping method because you could pack the oven full of the beer and then send it
be
over,
a lot of beer.
and it wouldn't get shaken up too bad.
First person to send us an oven full of beer from America, we will send a kegerator too.
I was going to say a T-shirt. So, a T-shirt inside a kegerator.
Yeah, that we sign personally.
Ruendu, Marisotter Kolsch. Will it Kolsch? Yes, it will Kolsch. Will it taste like a Kolsch? No.
For a Marisotter Kolsch, you'd probably have to do a certain percentage of light sugars, like some dextrose, or how would you go around that? So something as big a flavor as Marisotter, you'd probably have to do only 60% of the overall fermentables being Marisotter, and then between either corn or rice, and then
I kind of like the idea of brown rice flakes in there.
Right, yeah, the rice that was kind of the thing that I think could kind of combat that. There's a way to do it. It won't be exactly on, but there's a way to get close.
Yeah, so what you're going to be missing out as far as the differences is the actual base malt. When you have Pilsner base malts in there, that is a different sweet grain flavor than the Marisotter. Marisotter, I describe more as a sweet malt flavor, where the Pilsner malt is going to be a nice grainy flavor with just a touch of honey to it. So your base malt on there, base flavors are definitely going to be different, but you could make a Kolsch-like beer with Marisotter, and it could probably be really delicious. No!
What'd you do? Did you break it?
No, I'm just losing power, so it darkened. All right.
Let's see, what am I? I'm at 26.
Yeah, it's all right. I got 5. It'll last us for 10 more minutes, maybe. Is it gonna reach? Bump, bump, bump. Is it gonna reach?
Yeah. Matt Richardson just picked up a hot missile. I'm guessing that's kind of like a hot rocket. I'm not sure. Hot back style thing. Is it appropriate to recirculate wort through from whirlpool temps all the way down to pitching temperatures to pick up a variety of flavor and hop aromas? Yes. I would at some point try to tee that off into your fermenter. I wouldn't probably go all the way down to pitching temperatures. You can, but at some point you're risking O2 pickup just as much as you're risking anything else. So,
I will say, from having done it once or twice through our hop rocket, I won't go all the way down to pitching temperatures. One of the biggest reasons is actually viscosity. Through our hop rocket's a little bit bigger than yours probably, but once the viscosity of the liquid, once it starts to thicken up a little bit, it actually gets much harder to run through the hops, and I've gotten it to, it's been stuck far more times at cooler temperatures than it is at warmer temperatures. Plus, you're coagulating those proteins in there, which the hop leaves are going to grab and also create more of a blockage in it. So at that point, for me, myself here and what we do here, I normally take it down to probably about 160, where I'm really stopping getting any good flavors off of them, and then just push it back into the kettle, chill it down, and put it into the fermenter normally.
Did you guys do any accelerated fermentation of lagers? Thoughts on that versus traditional lagering? We do a lot of accelerated fermentation of lagers. Like most breweries that brew on a commercial scale, our tank space is precious. So yeah, we do that a lot. There is never going to be an exact accelerated fermentation or pseudo lager that tastes like a proper lager fermentation schedule. That said, you can get really good, really clean flavors off of certain yeasts and certain accelerated fermentations. They can get you close. And that's what we do a lot of the time because we don't have time for waste and tank space. Easy bake oven. So I will specify, I'm not saying easy bake oven's going to work. I'm saying oven. And it's got to be functional.
I want to be able to cook a roast in it.
Yeah.
Specifically a roast.
Did a Maris Otter Pilsner once, German Pils. Yeast was great, but not the white bread and honey flavor of a German Pils. Still good. Yeah, that's kind of what we expect. Even Halcyon, like we won't do any of our light beers like that with Halcyon, which Halcyon's a lighter version of a lot of Maris Otters, so it's got, I can smell that from here. Damn, boy. Someone's got a boner, and it's me. Yeah, so even Halcyon, it's going to be a lighter version of Maris Otter with a lot of the same big Maris Otter puffiness and flavor, but it's just not going to create that Pilsen flavor. So you got to use Pilsen malt or Heidelberg malt.
Yeah, definitely. Jimmy J, I love your idea of using black rice in a adjunct or maybe even a Japanese rice lager. That's actually one of the things that we discovered doing the Will It Brew series is it shouldn't be a surprise, but the different types of rice will give you different flavors coming out in the end. Yeah. And they're very delicious and should be explored a lot more.
When you are rinsing your rice, save that rinsed rice water because you need to rinse your rice and gelatinize it before you mash it. I don't know if you're mashing it, but if you plan on mashing it, you got to do that. But when you're rinsing your rice, save your rinsed rice water and add some sugar to it and ferment it with a champagne yeast.
And you have a small form of sake.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Sort of. It'll get you close.
No, or you just come to us and get some koji and do it right.
Is Halcyon the standard name of malt? I can't find Maris. So Halcyon, Halcyon. It's a branded name of a malt that Thomas Fawcett specifically does.
Yeah. You can only get Halcyon from Thomas Fawcett. There are probably some other malt producers who produce something similar to Halcyon, but when we're referring to Halcyon, it's the Thomas Fawcett malt.
And here's the thing that not a lot of people realize and that they need to understand. So Maris Otter isn't the same across the board. Maris Otter from Baird's is different than Maris Otter from Thomas Fawcett, is different from Maris Otter from Simpson's or anywhere else. They're all different malts. And the difference is dramatic. It's not. So if you've got like a recipe that says 9 pounds of Maris Otter and whatever else is in your recipe, if you choose Baird's Maris Otter, you're going to get a very, very clean beer. It's not too much different from, Two-Row. It's going to be a little bit more of that malty breadiness. It's definitely not going to have that cleanness and that graininess of Pilsner malts, but it's, not too far off from Two-Row. If you get Maris Otter from Thomas Fawcett, you are going to have some pretty big flavors from that Maris Otter. So they are very, very different things, and it's kind of something you got to realize is that just because it says a standardized beer name, like Two-Row, like Pale Malts, like Maris Otter, like Crystal 40, it's not going to be the same malt from maltster to maltster to maltster.
Someone should do a video on that includes 3 different chocolate malts.
Oh my God, someone should. Everyone, Google real quick to see if anyone's done a video on that with chocolate malts or brown malts or something.
Or brown malts. For those of you out there who don't know yet, we actually did a side-by-side comparison of chocolate and brown malts just for this reason. And the chocolate was pretty interesting, but the brown especially. It literally created 3 different beers from the exact same recipe, just using different producers. We had the Simpsons brown that created a porter. Pretty much, whereas the Thomas Fawcett brown created that sweet, soft nut brown, and then the Baird's I reversed those. Baird's created the soft nut brown, and the Thomas Fawcett's created that kind of Northern English, a little bit more roasty, toasty brown.
Yeah.
They're incredibly different from that. So I suggest if you are seeing Maris Otter in there and you have an opportunity to use several different Maris Otter malts, do that side by side and see which one you love the best.
I will personally also take a little bit of credit for some of the local homebrewers' success, because at a very early point in starting up the store, I think I picked some pretty damn good malts. So
yeah, for most of them.
Yeah.
But that's also something to be aware of. In the brown spectrum, if you are trying to make a Newcastle nut brown, you need to use Baird's brown malt.
Yep.
That's pretty much no way around it. Get your hands on that, and it's going to be stupid easy.
Yeah.
If you are trying to make more of like an American brown on there, the Thomas Fawcett's is where you're at. Like that. So that's something to be aware of.
And if you ever have a recipe that calls for brown malt in like 5% or less, it's probably something like Simpson's brown. So
something a lot more aggressive, but it's still going to give you that nice kind of brown toasted.
Bottom line is, recipes lie. I hate clone recipes. They're stupid. No one should do clone recipes. That's all I got for you.
Yeah, it actually.
We've harped on clone recipes a lot, and I'm just like, every time I get a clone recipe, I want people to be excited about the beer they're brewing, and I want them to be confident in the beer they're brewing. But at the same time, I'm like, there's so much you don't know about why this isn't going to work. But I still want them to make a good beer, so I do everything I can to help them make a good beer, and then hopefully slowly over time I can get them to realize, by the way, the malts are always going to be different, the hops are always going to be different, and your system is dramatically different. There's a lot of reasons why clone recipes are not viable. They're not clones.
You can clone a beer, but it won't be with the exact same recipe.
Yeah, it will. Yeah, it will
that's
never.
What it boils down to.
It will never be the same. It might be a really good beer, and so if you're just looking for a recipe, that's good. But if you think it's going to be, I get a lot of people that come in that made a clone recipe and they're like, "Oh, it tasted just like the real thing." I'm like, I guarantee it didn't. But if you made a good beer and you're happy with it,
just keep doing
I'm
it.
happy for you.
I had a clone recipe of Racer 5 from Bear Republic in California, and I mean, literally everybody that tried is like, yeah, it's almost like Racer 5, but better. I'm like, okay, let's stick with this. It wasn't what I was going for, but it's better, so let's do it. And that's what you need to do. Make a better beer than the beer you're trying to clone.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with starting with clone recipes as like a jump off point. I just want people to know, I vehemently want people to know that you are not making the same beer that you are trying to clone.
Yeah. Kevin Rabe, favorite two-row malt? I'm assuming you mean just kind of base two-row malt on that. Varies for beer, honestly, for me. But if I had to pick just one malt that I would use for absolutely every beer out there, honestly, it might be Viking Extra Pale.
Yeah, that's great two-row.
It's somewhere in between a standard pale two-row and a Pilsner malt with some great flavors. So manipulating that, you could get the Pilsner malt flavors, you could get the extra two-row or a pale flavors, Maris Otter flavors going on in there. So if I only had to use one for the rest of my life, that might be what it is. Or not Halcyon, but Heidelberg.
Yeah. Heidelberg's great because you can kind of build up whatever flavors on top of it. But I started on Great Western two-row. So for me, Great Western two-row represents that perfect neutrality. And that's probably just because I've done most of my beers with that as a base. And so that to me is like my white canvas, my blank slate. So because I know the base there, I feel like that'd be what I would go with right now. That said, I don't necessarily think it's the best tasting two-row.
See, then it just feels a little bit too boring. It's not necessarily
you can build
that
up
it's
whatever
boring,
on top of it.
Yeah. I'd like the extra character I got out of the extra pale.
Yeah.
But if you're trying
that's why I like Halcyon.
Yeah. If you're trying to decide that for the beer, you should decide that based on the beer. If you're doing something that needs that nice, light, grainy base, 100% I'm going in Heidelberg on that. Maybe Pilsner if I'm doing a Bavarian Pils and it's just going to be straight up Pilsen malt. But, if I'm going English beers, a lot of the time I'm actually going to be using some good Chevalier in there with a base underneath of Heidelberg. If I'm doing most American beers, it's honestly probably Halcyon in there. So for us, it depends on the beer. We change the base malt that's most appropriate for the beer style.
Rowan Van Dijik, I love this idea. Can we get basically every type of quake and what it does video? That would be a genius video. That's something we should do for 100%.
And if you are in a place to be able to send us some of those more obscure quake strains, we'll take them. There are a few that we honestly cannot get very easily.
Reverend KY, I like this question. Say you sparge a little bit too much and your last runnings are around 10:30. Have extra tank space, extra hops and yeast, DME. When do you decide to double batch a session? It kind of depends on your system. So for us, we've got fermenters at 7 barrels. We've got fermenters at 5 barrels. We've got fermenters at 2 barrels. We have fermenters at 14 gallons, and we have fermenters at 1 barrel and 5 gallons. So it really depends on the situation. But if I had extra space at 10:30 and I knew I had a beer coming up, depending on the malt that's in there, if it's not super obtrusive, not super dark or whatever, I would probably run that off and turn it into a starter for my next beer.
Yeah, 2 methods here. Either go the English Party Guile method and make a smaller beer that's super tasty, or go for the Czech double mash method, which is what Peter's talking about. Reserve that extra delicious
it's super good.
Spargy water. And then just throw it on, use that as your strike water for your next batch.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful, beautiful way to brew beers.
I did that with a reiterated mash that I did for an American barley wine last year, and that beer turned out great.
In fact, that's what we do for our barley wines here, actually. It's a phenomenal, you get extra enzymes out of there, you get extra flavor, and you reduce a lot of waste.
We've gotten a little bit of a cult following for those barley wines.
They're so delicious. Oh my God. We need to make some more, though.
We do.
That's what I'm going to do, actually, with all that DME. I'm going to make a black barley wine, I think.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Reduce the shit out of everything.
What's the white beer that we're trying to make? The next white beer.
The white stout?
It was like a white stout, but something different. We were just talking about this like the other day.
A white oyster stout.
That thing, yeah.
Yeah. A white oyster stout.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, super secret squirrel. We're going to work on maybe an oyster feed sometime this year in the future and make a white oyster stout. And I think I want to make an oyster pilsner with that too.
That'd be awesome.
So,
Joel, I don't know what you have on tap, but one on me, guys. Thanks a lot. One on me? Buy one on me.
I'll have one on you. Yeah.
That's what I'm guessing it
Thank
says.
you. Thank you very much.
you.
Anyway,
Thank
Peter
you
has
so-
trouble
one on
reading
me.
every once in a while.
Thank you so much, Joel. I appreciate the super chat. That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. There was a good question up here, Dave. Any good info sources on how to learn more about different malts by different maltsters? Almost every maltster is going to have the malt flavor wheel. It's going to have protein contents, all that kind of stuff. Do actually pay attention to that information. That way you can use it as references later. But 2 of the best ways to do it. 1, eat it. Literally just shove it in your mouth and eat it. The flavor that you're experiencing is pretty much the flavor that's going to come out of it. The second, which is also a very efficient way to do it, is to make a mini mash out of it. Boil up a small portion of water, put in a couple of ounces into a mason jar, let it mash out for a minute, drink that nice sweet wort, and see what it tastes like.
One thing I'll add is that there's not a good substitute for experience and just brewing with it too. So I know not everyone can brew as much as we brew, but at the same time, there's a lot of people that come in that they've got this idea from online on what a malt's going to taste like, and they're like, oh, it's going to taste like this because I read it's got cookie notes or whatever. And it's cookie notes to the maltster could be cookie notes completely differently to a different maltster, and it definitely is going to come out differently to you with the beer finally produced. So
tasting notes are pretty darn subjective. And that's why I say on that, when you get the information from the maltster, when you get the flavor wheel, when you get the protein content, sugar content, stuff like that, then get the malt, get the malt, make a beer with it or eat it, and attach that to your brain. This maltster is saying that the Maris Otter has this nice sweet flavor with a little bit of cookie on the back. You eat it and go, okay, now I know where they're coming from. So when I read their other malts on it, I know where this person is trying to taste it. But experience is going to be your best thing on it. You make your beer your way, and experience can pretty much is your best way to know where that's going to come out.
Daniel, I don't know what you're responding to, but you finished it off with keeps you from fermenting, or keeps you from dumping 30% crystal into your mash. Don't know what that's responding to, but I support the message. Thank you for preaching the gospel.
Definitely.
When should you add ascorbic acid? Would it make sense to when you're dry hopping? Ascorbic acid when you're dry hopping does make sense. We do it in mash for completely different reasons. So ascorbic acid is an oxygen scrubber, which means it will take out oxygen during dry hopping. We use it to create certain compounds that make our beer shelf stable. So that's not what's going to happen when you're adding it during dry hopping. During dry hopping, you're literally just scrubbing whatever oxygen could potentially oxidize your hops at the moment. If you add it during mash, you are going through different variations of the Maillard process, Maillard browning during boil. And you're creating what's called reductones, and those reductones make your beer super shelf stable. So that's why we do it in the mash for every single beer.
Yeah, you can add it. You can definitely add it at dry hopping too to help prevent the oxidation of your beer during dry hopping. We have just found that in mash, it helps create more oxidative preventive things. So do it both places. No, don't. Do it in the mash. Do it at dry hopping. Just do it. Add some ascorbs.
Reverend KY, thank you for the Tim Hat Fund.
Hey, you know what? Well, it probably actually might have some lobster juice on there from yesterday. That's now that I think about it. Yes, I do need a new hat though. We need to get our. Oh man!
Didn't we just get new hats from that
No,
maltster that?
I just. Oh yeah, the monster. Yeah, I took that one.
Yeah, I left you hat back there for that.
Yeah, I did. That's my new work hat.
Okay.
So this doesn't become my work hat, but it should because it already is. Lactose required for sweet stout. Jimmy, no. It is not required for a sweet stout, but you do have to get the sweetness from somewhere, and lactose is always the easiest way. But the sweetness that comes from lactose adds kind of a milky creaminess, so that's a good way to get kind of some milky chocolate flavors going on, or a little bit more creaminess to your beer.
You can also add certain malt sugars that are going to do that. You can add non-fermentable sugars like monk fruit. The way I've mostly done a sweet stout is actually just tried to add enough malt sugars that are non-fermentable just for my mash, my grist, that makes it so that the final gravity can't drop below 1018.
Yeah. Daniel said that his 30% crystal was in response to a clone recipe. And that is actually something. There are so many times that you see somebody on the internet cloned Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, and they literally walk in and there's 30 to 40% Crystal 10, Crystal 15 in it, and it's, you don't do that. Just don't do that. It's frustrating. Like, how did you get here? What led you in your life? What led you to put that much crystal malt in?
Who hurt you?
Like, come on, son. Did you ever tasted Sierra Nevada's Pale Ale? Does not have 40% C10 in it.
So on the TikTok that Ryan did for me, that was me doing a Kentucky comment on the fly. One of the comments was from a pro brewer that was like, I think you got to have a medium crystal malt in there, and you got to use black malts. And he definitely knows what he's doing. That's traditional for the style. So that's exactly right. But I have reasons for not doing that, and part of that comes from my deep-seated hatred of never using crystal malts. So my response to that was to use Cali Common yeast, and the Cali Common yeast is going to create a little bit of fruitiness that can give you the perception of sweetness. and with the 20% corn adjunct in the bill, hopefully give you that same kind of flavor range. It's not going to be exactly right, but watch that TikTok and see my recipe, and then comment what you guys would do different.
That's going to be interesting because he's probably going to, I mean, I've never brewed a Kelly Common before. I honestly don't have a great idea what would go in there, but I think it would be a very interesting beer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking a nice proportion of Chevalier for biscuitiness, because it's my favorite malt, for biscuitiness and color, but then lighten it way up with some corn.
I can almost see rice. If you're using Chevalier as the basic, I could almost see rice being like a...
Rice is my first instinct, but the corn for the fruitiness.
Well, you gotta have. I mean, Kentucky Common and corn is traditional. That corn flavor's got to be there.
Got to be there.
But
and I don't want to put it through bad brewing practices. So
yeah,
maybe a combination of corn and rice, and maybe even just a tiny scotch touch of like special roast or special X for that sourdough.
Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, a 1%.
There's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, guys.
There is.
So take a video of you skinning a cat and let us know your. Don't do that. Soren Brock.
Anyway,
Brockdorf,
this is a delicious beer, by the way.
Soren Brockdorf, thank you so much for the super chat. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Freaking beautiful hair. Yes, it is. I actually just got my hair cut the other day, and I am feeling fantastic about it. I thought about shaving, well, not shaving my beard, but, at least containing it, and then that just seemed silly. Oh, yeah. See, Daniel, toss the black malt medium crystal, use 5% crystal 120 or special B instead. All right, so I think special B would be just a little bit too figgy, fruity, but I kind of like the idea of combining a special B with the 120 to get more of that sweetness, darkness out of it. That sounds fantastic. Trying to make a pho-inspired stout using anise, cinnamon, cloves, and ginger. That sounds delicious.
And it sounds like you should actually make that into a broth for pho.
And then you should serve it to us.
Yes.
Please. I will say this. We actually did make a beer that 100% tasted like a soup broth. It was an amazing flavor and was not a beer. You cooked with it. That's what you did, is you cooked with it. That was green onions, though, wasn't it?
The green onion,
The green onion beer. Yeah.
Damn it, Hayden. Nick Gallagher, here's a great question. Is Cara Munich or Red X appropriate in a Marzen? Cara Munich, absolutely not. Red X, you can use it, but don't overdo it.
Yeah. The Marzen, I mean, most Marzens are getting their color from Munich and Vienna being their base malts with that extra, hour and a half boil time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cara Munich, any crystal malts, any Cara Munich, any roast malts in a Marzen, a Vienna lager, fest beer. Like we had so this guy brought us into Vienna, that was to the T fermented absolutely correct, but it was a little bit too dark and fruity.
It was.
And that's it's I don't know exactly what he used in it, but
I think he used an actual roasted for.
Well, the one we had the one we had on the last live stream was a Vienna guy that used it roast for the color.
Okay,
I don't think he did it.
That might have been the one I was thinking of.
Yeah, it was the other guy.
Okay, but I mean, he even told us when he did it that this is not exactly traditional. I just did it this way because I wanted to, and we support that.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was an amazingly incredible beer as well. But I mean, Marzen, German beers are simple. They're simple and they're about process and about the actual perfection of that process. So if you're using a cheater malt, you're not doing it the right way. And most Cara malts are cheater malts. They're meant to give you flavors without doing the process of actually getting that flavor. So use the base malts, do the great process for it, and you'll have some success.
Derek T, so no smash Red X Marzen. If you use Red X as 100% of the grain bill, it's going to be too intense to be a Marzen. You're making a lagered, I would almost call that closer at that point to like a lighter colored Bock.
It probably wouldn't have the right Maillard caramely sweetness for a bock. You're making a red lager is what you're making.
Yeah.
Pretty much. You're taking basically, you know, that kind of nice American red ale base and lagering it out, which could be actually really delicious. Go for it. Send us one.
Joel, 10% red X and an amber. You can use 10 to 30% to 40%. Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Like, that's
an
a
amber?
great amber base.
Yeah. 100%.
Do it.
You can use lots.
That's good information. Reverend KY coming out for the Marzen. Be careful with your harvest yeast, too. A wee bit crazy this year. Thank you. We'll spread that around. The harvest yeast is my preferred for the Marzen. It's the Munich lager yeast. It's an awesome yeast. But good to know that it's a little bit nutty. It's a bit nutty.
A bit nutty. All right. Well, we're past open time, and we got to actually get open.
Yeah, I think somebody's actually out there. We got to get open, and we actually have to go set up for a beer festival today.
Everyone like this video real quick. Don't forget to send us a toaster oven and a stove.
Full of beer.
Yes.
And like a real one. A real stove full of real beer. Well, you know, full of beer. Don't forget, you know, push the like button on it, smash it. Throw it on the ground just as long as, you know, you get the like button, punch it in the jeans, all that kind of stuff. Gonna kill this damn fly. Like all of our other social medias, go over to Discord, like that good stuff. If you are in Spokane coming up to Among the Pines, we will see you then. And it's great to have beer festivals back. We love you guys. We'll see you later.